Did you know Egypt once buried more than 4 million mummified ibises in one place? Not kings, not queens, just birds, stacked in endless tunnels. And here's the strangest part. People back then actually bought these mummies the way we buy candles at church today. But why did an entire culture turn animals into messengers for the gods? Let's take a closer look at ancient Egypt's bizarre animal cults. For the real shock, after all, comes when you find out how many animals were sacrificed for everyday prayers. Now, picture yourself visiting a shrine and leaving a mummified cat instead of flowers. In ancient Egypt, that was normal. Pilgrims brought animal mummies as offerings. At Saqqara, long galleries held cats, ibises, dogs, and falcons. And at Tuna el Gabel, millions of ibises were buried for the god Thoth. One text claims priests kept 60,000 ibises alive at once. Archaeologists say more than 4 million ibis mummies have been found until now. The Anubis catacomb may have held 8 million dogs, with most of them being puppies. These offerings sat at the heart of everyday religion in later Egypt. Typically, visitors pay a priest for a mummy wrapped in neat linen, and the priest would place it in a communal vault. People believed the animal's spirit would carry their prayer to the gods. So, temples produced them on a huge scale, likely with animal farms. Think puppy mills and bird aviaries, but for sacrifice. Most of the dogs in one catacomb were newborns, suggesting breeding just for rituals. Tens of thousands of animals a year went through this system. One archaeologist said the Egyptians didn't see cruelty in it, but a gift to the gods. To us, however, it looks harsher. High demand, however, brought problems. Modern-day CT scans show some bundles held no full animals at all. Some had only bones, wings, or feathers. Others had nothing but cloth and reeds. A record from Saqqara says reforms were made after priests were caught selling fakes. It ordered one god in one jar, meaning each mummy should contain a full animal. Priests had been stuffing parts together or selling empty bundles, and some were jailed. Scholars argue over whether this was fraud or if a single feather could still count. Either way, the trade prospered and temples made money from it. This practice ran from about 700 BC through the Greco-Persian and Ptolemaic times. But if mass sacrifice seems strange, wait until you meet the bulls and crocodiles who lived as divine kings. Now, not all sacred animals were small offerings. Some were worshipped while alive as gods. And the most famous of these was the Apis bull of Memphis. It was a black and white calf, and it was seen as the living form of Ptah, and later Osiris. Inscriptions and Greek writers say Apis lived like royalty. He had his own priests, his own stable, and even sacred cow companions. Crowds came to watch him, believing his movements answered questions. When Apis died, Egypt mourned like it had lost a king. He was mummified and sealed in a massive granite coffin at Saqqara. Archaeologists uncovered dozens of these coffins, each tied to royal dedications. The cult lasted for over 2,000 years, and it was honored even by Alexander the Great and the Ptolemies. Apis, however, was not alone. At Heliopolis, the Mnevis bull embodied Ra. And at Armant, the Buchis bull represented Montu. And when one of these bulls died, it too was mummified and buried in a special tomb, often marked with stelae. Beyond bulls, other sacred mascots flourished. In the Fayum, crocodiles of Sobek swam in temple pools, fed delicacies by priests, and later mummified. Greek visitors told of one crocodile called Petsuchos, or the son of Sobek. It wore gold and jewels and ate honey cakes. And when these crocodiles died, they were embalmed. Hundreds have been found at Crocodilopolis and Com Ombo. At Bubastis, cats wandered the temple of Bastet. And when they died, they too were mummified and buried in huge catacombs. Furthermore, baboons and, as mentioned before, ibises sacred to Thoth were also honored at Hermopolis and Saqqara. Falcons, too, for there's evidence of them being buried for Horus. And also, rams were mummified for Khnum or Amun. So yes, each animal stood for a god. These cults were different from votive mummies. Here, one animal lived as the chosen form of a god. It was cared for until death, then buried with ceremony. Texts and tombs confirm the practice. Herodotus praised the festival of Bastet, and the Serapeum and Bucum burial sites preserve the bull's burials. Debate continues about belief, however. Was the animal itself the god, or just a vessel? Most agree the Egyptians saw little line between the divine and the animal. The god left one body only to enter the next. But let's talk more about the archaeologists' discoveries. You see, in the 19th century, when explorers at Bubastis and Saqqara broke into tunnels packed with mummies, they found out that some of them were neatly stacked, while others were thrown in piles. One huge cache of cat mummies was even shipped to Europe and ground up for fertilizer. Only later did scholars begin to study them seriously. Modern scans, however, have changed the picture. CT and X-ray studies show some bundles hold full skeletons, others hide surprises. For instance, one hawk turned out to be a lizard, and an ibis-shaped bundle held 2 snakes instead of a bird. But later on, excavations provided us with more context. You see, when archaeologists at Saqqara uncovered embalming workshops between the years 2019 and 2023, they came to find that one was for humans and the other was for animals. They found stone tables, drains and jars of resin and oil. So, the evidence points to mummification on an industrial scale in the 4th century BC. And this, in turn, proved to us that these cults were not only religious, but also economic. For instance, temples charged fees for offerings. Breeding farms, embalmers, weavers, and guards all formed part of the workforce. Some cult centers grew wealthy during the late period and under the Ptolemies, and the numbers prove the scale. Mummifying tens of thousands of ibises required massive imports of natron and oils, which shows wide trade networks feeding the cults. So priests gained both spiritual and financial power. And some scholars think the cults also acted as a symbol of Egyptian identity under foreign rule. The Archive of Hor, from a 2nd century BC priest, records the running of an ibis cult. It lists burial schedules, prices, and disputes. It even notes annual mass burials once enough mummies were ready. So, this matches the layers found in the catacombs. Inscriptions on small coffins and stelae confirm the cults tied together, faith and temple business. But devotion often came at a cost, and it's one that makes us question how far faith can go. Burying millions of animals may seem dark and horrific to us, but it made sense to the ancients. Historians, nevertheless, keep asking, why was it done at such a huge scale? And part of the answer is devotion. As touched upon earlier, animals were seen as vessels of divine power, and so, by honoring them, people felt closer to the gods. In later times, personal prayer became common, and animal mummies served as messengers. Some were even inscribed with names and prayers from the donor, but still, the numbers are confounding. Hundreds of millions of mummies meant a massive cost in time and labor. Cats, after all, stood for mystery and fertility, calm one moment and fierce the next. They embodied Bastet or Sekhmet. Crocodiles and snakes were mummified too, to appease their danger. And you know, some of the details of these practices unsettle us today. For instance, CT scans show falcons were killed by breaking their necks to make offerings. The same was likely done to puppies, kittens, and hatchlings. But again, for Egyptians, this was holy work, no matter how brutal it may seem to us. And in 2019, lion cub mummies from Saqqara showed how far they took it. So yes, even lions, which were rare and dangerous, were sacrificed for Bastet. It's hard to imagine the process of embalming such predators. And in the end, animal cults were huge, devout, and strange. They tied faith, economy, and nature into one practice. From shrews to bulls, every sacrifice was seen as part of Mahat, the order of the world. To them it wasn't grotesque. To us, it distorts the line between human and animal, and the resources spent were enormous, producing millions of mummies. Today, these bundles are like sealed time capsules, opened again by science. So, what once was devotion now looks macabre. Yet for centuries, it was how people expressed love, fear, and gratitude to the gods. And eventually, Roman laws and new religions ended the practice. As a result, the catacombs were sealed and left in the dark for centuries. When archaeologists reopened them, the past spilled out. And yes, at one point in Egypt, it really did rain cats and dogs.